Thank you, Ceann. I welcome the establishment by the Oireachtas of the Consultative Forum on International Security Policy. The brutal invasion by Russia of Ukraine has significantly altered the international security environment. War has broken out in Europe again. The rules-based international order is under threat, and like-minded democracies need to show solidarity with each other at this time. Countries in Europe are reassessing their security and defence policies. Sweden and Finland responded immediately by applying to join NATO. New and emerging threats are all too apparent to us here in Ireland. Cyber attacks, hybrid warfare, disinformation, election interference and threats to critical infrastructure have become a reality in the world of today. It's not that long ago since our health service was crippled by a cyber attack on the HSE. Russian Navy and merchant ships continue to be observed off the south and west coast in our exclusive economic zone in the vicinity of the underseas cables connecting the US and Europe. It would be negligent and irresponsible if our government did not assess these new threats and bring forward policy responses in respect of our security and defence position. The Forum, as we've heard, will consider these matters in June in Cork, Galway and Dublin. I suggest we need a respectful, honest and mature debate on these matters. There should be maximum engagement and all points of view should be considered. And I welcome the fact that there will be no predetermined or preconceived outcomes from the discussion at the Forum, according to the Taoiseach here today. Since World War II, Ireland has pursued a policy of military neutrality, and that policy continues to serve us well. We do not participate in military alliances or mutual defence arrangements, and I don't see the need to change this fundamental policy. But we are not politically neutral and we do cooperate with other states, both in the UN and the EU, in respect of security and defence matters. When we joined the United Nations in 1955 and the EEC in 1973, we accepted that we could not act alone as regards our foreign policy. In my view, the Forum needs to pay particular attention to the EU's common security and defence policy, how it is evolving and how Ireland is responding to these changes. We have been active participants in CSDP. We have been involved in PESCO missions. We have agreed to the concept of EU battle groups. We pay into the European Defence Fund. We have signed up to the EU training mission for Ukraine, now underway in Cyprus. And we have provided non-lethal support for Ukraine under the European Peace Facility. And we've also signed up to the Strategic Compass, which commits member states to spend more on defence, to develop their military and security capacity and to cooperate with NATO. Under the Strategic Compass, a rapid reaction force will also be established. However, at the end of the day, it should be remembered that defence remains a national competence within the EU, and like other member states, we can opt in or opt out of missions having regard to our unique history, traditions and circumstances. Central to Irish foreign policy should be peacekeeping, conflict prevention, peace building, arms control and nuclear disarmament. We have a proud tradition as regards UN and EU peacekeeping, crisis management and conflict resolution. We need to continue to advocate for disarmament and non-proliferation of nuclear arms. It should be noted also that our signing of the 2017 UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is incompatible with NATO membership anyway. Fighting global hunger and food insecurity must also be key objectives for Ireland, and we should continue with our special interest in the welfare and development of the global south in particular. Which brings me to the issue of grey zone warfare, cyber attacks, hybrid warfare and threats to our critical infrastructure. Our critical infrastructure includes natural gas subsea interconnectors, an electric subsea interconnector, subsea cables that make up our telecoms infrastructure, many of which are critical to global communications. Already we have seen interference with Nord Stream 1 and 2 gas pipelines. There have also been warnings of potential cyber attacks on our energy grid. The Forum needs to examine the implications of the EU Directive on Network and Information Security too, and how this will be transposed into Irish law. It also needs to examine the role of the Naval Service and the Air Corps in protecting our critical infrastructure, and if it has the necessary capacity to do this. I believe we also need to hear more about reports that Ireland is likely to join a NATO Partnership for Peace project to protect undersea cables from a possible Russian sabotage attack. The Dáil needs to be kept informed about this initiative as it evolves. The Forum also needs to take a long, hard look at the so-called triple lock, whereby the government and the Dáil must give approval for deployment of our defence forces overseas, and whereby any decision in this regard must be backed up by a UN Security Council resolution. It's just not acceptable that Russia or China, for example, can veto a mission that Ireland would like to participate in. It has also become very clear that Ireland must be able to defend its neutrality. We need an armed neutrality, if you like. That is why the establishment of the Commission on Defence Forces was timely, as was the subsequent decision to increase defence spending on the Army, the Air Corps and the Naval Service. As the Taoiseach has said just now, Ireland is now committed to multi-annual funding increases to reach a defence budget of €1.5 billion by 2028, linked to inflation, and I welcome that. I think we also need to hear more about the secret arrangement dating back to 1952, which allows RAF aircraft to intercept hostile aircraft in Irish airspace and to use lethal force if necessary. We are told that this involves a memorandum of understanding and not a legal treaty. I've heard what the Taoiseach had to say about this, and I appreciate that he believes secrecy is needed to some extent in this regard. But it has been widely reported in the media in recent days, and the UK Minister for State for the Armed Forces, James Haughey, has confirmed that the arrangement is in fact in place. I believe the Dáil needs to be given some information about this arrangement at this stage, given the comments of James Haughey in the House of Commons. Returning to common security and defence policy, I want to welcome the Taoiseach's remarks about concerns that the EU's common security and defence policy is a stepping stone to a European army. And I agree with him on this. It is a fact that no EU nation state is contemplating the creation of a European army, and none are wishing for one to be established. But at the end of the day, the EU is first and foremost a peace project created out of the ruins of World War I and World War II, and is founded on liberal democratic values. This is something that should not be forgotten as the CSDP evolves in the years ahead. I've listened to the debate so far as to why a citizens' assembly has not been set up to look at this issue. And I appreciate what the Taoiseach has said, that the matter is urgent and that there are already 2 citizens' assemblies underway in relation to drugs and education. And I accept what he has to say in this regard. The matter is becoming urgent, and I agree, therefore, that the Forum is the way to proceed at this stage. So in relation to military neutrality, from a legal point of view, we need to first consult with the EU treaties, specifically the Lisbon Treaty, but also the Irish Constitution. A protocol to the Lisbon Treaty states that the treaty, quote, does not affect or prejudice Ireland's traditional policy of military neutrality, unquote. And Article 29(4)(9) of Bunreacht na hÉireann, which was added following the defeat of the first Lisbon referendum, states that, and I quote, "The state shall not adopt a decision taken by the European Council to establish a common defence pursuant to Article 42 of the Treaty of the European Union, where that common defence would include the state," unquote. So it's interesting to note that the word neutrality does not appear in the Constitution. There is also Article 42 of the Lisbon Treaty making provision for a national assistance clause. So that's the legal position as I see it in relation to this matter, and I don't think there's any need to revisit that legal position at this stage. So again, I think we are having a constructive and mature debate here, and listening to all points of view, and I hope that the Forum will also adopt a similar position. Times are changing, and as I say, the brutal invasion of Russia by Russia of Ukraine has certainly forced a reassessment of security and defence policies by the EU, by member states and countries generally in the vicinity of Europe. So I thank the Taoiseach for this initiative. The matter is becoming more and more urgent by the day. We see developments, as I say, in relation to Russian ships off the west and south coasts of Ireland. We see all sorts of other developments as well. So the debate is certainly timely, if not overdue, and I look forward to engaging with the Forum as it sets about its task next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy High.